Beneath the forest floor, something is awake. Not in the way animals are awake, restless and searching. In a quieter way. A way that has no name in any human language, and yet has been moving, slowly, for longer than mountains have held their shape. Right now, beneath every old forest on earth, beneath the moss and the fallen leaves and the soft, dark ceiling of soil, a conversation is happening. You cannot hear it. You cannot see it. But if you were to kneel at the base of an ancient tree and press your ear to the earth, something in you might sense that the silence there is not empty at all. The threads that carry this conversation are thinner than a single strand of your hair. Under a microscope, they look almost too delicate to be real, pale and branching like frost on a winter window. These are mycorrhizal fungal threads, and they are the physical cables of what scientists have begun calling the wood wide web. One thread alone could vanish between your fingertips without a trace. But woven together across meters and acres and entire forests, they form something so intricate and so vast that the word network feels almost too small for it. Even now, as you breathe, these threads are carrying materials between living trees in every forest, on every continent. The science confirms it. The full meaning of it remains, gently, out of reach. 450 million years ago, before the first forest existed, before the first leaf unfolded toward a sun that had never yet lit a canopy, fungi were already in the soil. They had been there, some researchers believe, even longer than that. And when the earliest land plants made their slow, improbable arrival onto dry earth, the fungi were waiting. Not the way a predator waits, but the way patience itself waits, holding space for something that has not yet arrived. This partnership between plant and fungus is among the oldest continuous relationships in the history of life, and it has never ended. The network beneath your nearest forest is, in a sense, the same one that was present when the world was young. A tree gives sugar to the fungus. The fungus gives back water and minerals and access to places the tree's own roots cannot reach. This is the agreement at the heart of the wood wide web, and it is written not in words but in chemistry, in the molecular language of roots and threads exchanging materials in the dark. Trees produce these sugars through photosynthesis, drawing energy from sunlight high above and sending it down, through bark and cambium and root, into the soil, where the fungus receives it. Scientists have confirmed this exchange with remarkable precision. What they are still working to understand is how the tree and the fungus negotiate, how they adjust, how they seem, somehow, to know what each other needs. Take a single teaspoon of healthy forest soil. Hold it gently in your palm. Inside that small weight, invisible to you, are miles of fungal threads. Not centimeters, miles. The mathematics of it sits quietly beyond imagination, and yet it is verified, measured, real. This density is what makes the network possible, what allows it to be present everywhere beneath the forest simultaneously, threading between roots, around stones, through the spaces between soil particles in the dark. But this extraordinary density is also a vulnerability. Compact that same soil, press it too hard, drive something heavy across it, and the threads collapse. A density that took decades to build can be undone in a single afternoon. That fragility is part of the forest's quiet truth. Scientists can follow carbon through the wood wide web the way you might follow a river on a map. Using isotopes, specific and traceable forms of carbon atoms, researchers have watched molecules leave the roots of one tree and arrive inside the tissues of another, crossing meters of dark soil within days. The carbon does not wander. It travels through the fungal network along paths that seem, from the outside, almost purposeful, almost deliberate. Whether intention plays any role in this movement is a question biology has not yet answered. What has been confirmed is the movement itself, real and measurable, a quiet flow of life passing between trees that appear above ground to have no connection at all. In every old forest, there are trees that hold the network together more than others. The oldest, the largest, the ones whose roots have had the longest time to weave themselves into the soil. Researchers call them mother trees, and something in that name feels right, not as a metaphor but as a description of function. These trees send disproportionately large amounts of resources through the network toward seedlings, toward the young and the shaded and the struggling. They do not send equally to all. They seem to direct more toward those who need it most. Scientists still debate the mechanisms behind this apparent selectivity, but the direction of the flow has been measured, confirmed, and gently wondered at. When insects begin feeding on a tree's leaves, something changes below ground. Chemical signals, complex and specific, begin moving through the mycelium outward from the affected tree toward its neighbors. And those neighbors respond. They begin producing defensive compounds in their own leaves, preparing for an attack that has not yet reached them. The warning travels faster than the insects. It arrives before the damage does. Researchers confirm this network-mediated defense response in controlled studies, and it has since been observed in forest settings. What the signal is made of, precisely how it initiates, and whether it is in any sense deliberate, those questions belong to the category of things science is still sitting with, quietly. The fungi that thread beneath today's forests are not newcomers. Their lineages stretch back across time so vast that the number almost loses meaning. The same fungal species that connected the great Carboniferous forests, those ancient swamps of towering club mosses and early conifers, still thread their way through the woodland soils you might walk through on an autumn morning. Virtually unchanged, recognizable, present. There is something steadying about that continuity, something that makes the forest feel less like a place and more like a patience, a long ongoing arrangement between living things that have simply never stopped agreeing to be together. When a forest loses its trees and its network both, it does not easily recover what it had. The wood wide web is not quickly rebuilt. But when it remains intact, when the soil is undisturbed and the threads are whole, something measurable happens in times of drought. Trees connected to the network survive significantly better than isolated trees. The fungal threads extend far beyond where the roots alone can reach, finding water in soil layers the tree itself could never access. This is the network's strength in its most visible form, a quiet infrastructure that holds living things together through difficult seasons. And yet, a single plow through that soil, one pass of a blade, can sever connections that took a century to form. At the place where a fungal thread enters a root cell, something extraordinary and ordinary happens simultaneously. The thread does not simply touch the root, it enters it, passing through the cell wall and pressing against the inner membrane, creating a structure so intimate it barely leaves space between two kingdoms of life. At this interface, nutrients cross, sugars cross, information, in its chemical form, crosses. The space between fungus and root cell at this point is measured in nanometers, smaller than a wavelength of visible light, and yet, across that invisible threshold, an exchange is happening that has sustained forests since before anything alive today existed. Science has mapped it. Its full significance is still slowly coming into view. The trees in a healthy forest do not share only with their own kind. Birch and fir, oak and pine, species that evolved separately across millions of years, pass resources between each other through the shared mycelium, as though the boundaries between them are, in some contexts, more permeable than fixed. This interspecies generosity was one of the more surprising confirmations to emerge from mycorrhizal research, and it continues to expand as more forest partnerships are studied. Scientists are still mapping the full range of which species share with which, under what conditions, and at what cost. What is already clear is that the forest, as a community, behaves in ways that a collection of separate individuals simply would not. The oldest mother trees alive today have been standing for more than 5 centuries. During that time, their root systems have grown, branched, died back, and regrown through soil that has slowly transformed around them. Their fungal partnerships have deepened and expanded over generations of fungal threads. Some researchers use the word memory when describing what old forest soil holds, not quite as metaphor, not quite as science, but as a term reaching towards something not yet fully defined. Whether a forest network accumulates something like experience across time, whether age in a mother tree changes the quality of what it holds for its community, are questions that remain, honestly and openly, unanswered. The experiment that first confirmed interspecies carbon sharing in forests was conducted in the 1990s. Before that, the idea that a birch tree might feed a fir tree through an underground fungal connection was considered, by much of mainstream biology, an unlikely hypothesis. The confirmation changed the framework. It was not a dramatic announcement. It arrived quietly, the way most genuine discoveries do, as a result slowly accumulating until it could no longer be set aside. Since then, hundreds of studies have extended and deepened the original finding. But the spirit of that first confirmation, the moment when an old intuition turned out to be measurably real, remains part of what makes the Wood Wide Web one of the more quietly astonishing stories in modern science. In a young plantation of a single tree species, planted in rows, managed for timber, the Wood Wide Web is often almost absent. The fungal diversity is low. The connections between trees are few and thin. The seedlings are, in a biological sense, alone in a way that forest seedlings in old growth almost never are. This contrast between a monoculture and a diverse old forest is not merely aesthetic or philosophical. It is measurable in growth rates, in survival during stress, in the capacity of the soil to hold water and carbon. The network grows stronger with age and variety. It is, in a sense, a mirror of the community that builds it. When a tree is dying, something moves. In the final weeks and months of a tree's life, as its roots begin to withdraw and its chemistry changes, a surge of carbon and nutrients flows outward through the network into the surrounding soil and into the roots of living neighbors. This transfer has been measured. It is real. Whether the dying tree initiates it, whether it is an active release or a passive leaking, whether it constitutes something that could be called a final contribution, those questions remain open. What is known is that the network does not simply go quiet when a tree ends. Something passes. The forest receives it. Life continues in a form the departing tree helped to shape. Beneath the forest, the fungi are also adjusting the soil's chemistry in ways that ripple far beyond individual trees. Fungal threads secrete compounds that alter pH, that activate or suppress the availability of specific minerals, that change the electrical properties of soil particles across areas far larger than any single root system. These adjustments affect which plants can grow where, which bacteria thrive in which zones, how water moves through the ground. The fungi are not merely conduits for what trees need. They are shapers of the environment in which the whole forest exists. The scale of this influence, from the molecular to the landscape level, is something researchers are still fully tracing. Why does a mother tree send more resources to her own genetic offspring than to the seedlings of other trees? Scientists have found that she does. The network appears to recognize kin and to favor them in ways that go beyond simple proximity. The mechanism involves chemical signals in the root zone that may allow trees to identify their own relatives in the soil around them. But how this recognition works at a molecular level, how specific it is, and whether it involves anything like what we would call awareness, These questions remain among the most carefully and genuinely open in forest biology. The forest, here, keeps its own counsel. Science listens at the edge of something it has not yet fully named. In the very oldest forests, the ones where no plow has ever turned the soil, no road has compressed the ground, the fungal networks are described by researchers not merely as dense, but as layered, ancient, interwoven to a degree that makes them ecosystems in their own right. Within the network, there are fungi that decompose, fungi that protect, fungi that specialize in particular trees or particular minerals. The diversity of species in a single square meter of undisturbed old-growth soil can exceed the diversity of trees visible in the canopy above it. These soils are described, quietly and without exaggeration, as among the most biologically complex environments on Earth. The Wood Wide Web stores carbon, every tree that grows larger because of network support, every seedling that survives a difficult first year because of shared resources, every forest that recovers faster from drought because its fungi are intact, represents carbon held in wood and root and soil, rather than released into the air. This carbon storage function is real, significant, and quietly foundational to the stability of the climate that all living things depend upon. And yet, in most of the models scientists use to project the future of Earth's carbon balance, the mycorrhizal network barely appears. It remains, for now, a vast and ancient force that the larger conversation about life on Earth is only beginning to include. There is a word, mycelium, that comes from the Greek word for mushroom, but the thing it names is not quite a mushroom, not quite a root, not quite anything the Greek language was built to describe. It is more like a thought that has taken physical form, a living intention spread through darkness, present everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Scientists classify it, measure it, trace its chemistry with precision, and still, when you stand in an old forest and consider that the ground beneath you is threaded with something that exists at the boundary of what biology has words for, the classification feels like the beginning of understanding, not the end of it. Somewhere beneath a forest you may never visit, a single fungal organism is quietly present beneath the entire canopy. Not a colony, not a population, one individual. Its threads extending across acres of soil, connecting dozens or hundreds of trees in a network that is, biologically speaking, a single living thing. Some mycorrhizal networks are among the largest individual organisms ever identified on Earth. The famous honey fungus of Oregon, though not mycorrhizal, gave science a language for this scale. The mycorrhizal equivalents are less dramatic in their visibility, and no less extraordinary in their size. They exist beneath forests on every continent, vast and silent and almost entirely unseen. Before there were forests, before there were trees, before there was soil in any recognizable sense, the earliest land, plants faced a world of bare rock and mineral dust and drying air. They could not have survived it alone. The fungi were already present in that ancient ground, and the partnership that formed between them in that first improbable colonization of dry land was not merely convenient. It was, in the view of many researchers, the biological event that made complex terrestrial life possible at all. Every forest that has ever stood, every meadow, every garden, traces its existence back in some way to that first quiet agreement between a plant and a fungus in a world still learning what land could be. Trees do not accept just any fungal partner. They communicate through their roots, releasing specific chemical compounds called exudates into the surrounding soil, compounds that function as signals, as invitations, as criteria. Different compounds attract different fungal species. The composition of what a tree releases shifts depending on what it needs, what season it is, what stress it is under, and the fungi respond to these signals with their own chemical replies. This negotiation, conducted entirely in molecular language beneath the soil surface, involves a level of biochemical specificity that researchers are still working to fully decode. What is already clear is that the partnership is not passive. Both parties are actively, chemically, communicating before they ever make contact, in the deep shade beneath a closed forest canopy, where almost no direct sunlight reaches the ground. Seedlings face an almost impossible arithmetic. They cannot photosynthesize enough to fuel their own growth. They should, by simple calculation, fail, and yet they persist. They survive their first season, and their second, drawing on resources that do not come from the light above, but from the network below. The mother trees and the older neighbors send carbon through the mycelium into these shaded seedlings, bridging the gap between what the young tree can produce and what it needs to survive. This is the network at its most tender, holding open a possibility that physics alone would close. In forests where trees and fungi have been growing together long enough, the growth advantage the network provides becomes measurable in ways that change how we understand forest development. Network-connected trees in low-light conditions grow up to 4 times faster than isolated trees in the same conditions. 4 times. That difference is not marginal. It reshapes the timeline of a forest's life, the speed at which a canopy closes, the rate at which carbon accumulates, the pace at which shelter forms for everything living beneath. And yet, remove the fungi, sterilize the soil, sever the connection, and that advantage disappears entirely. The tree is the same, the light is the same, only the network is gone, and everything changes. Some researchers, working carefully at the edge of what their data allows them to say, have begun using the phrase distributed memory when describing certain properties of mycorrhizal networks. Not memory in the way an animal remembers, not stored images or recalled events, but something more like a tendency encoded in structure, a pattern of connection shaped by past exchanges that influences future ones. Whether this constitutes anything like memory, in a meaningful biological sense, remains genuinely, carefully open. Science is precise about where its evidence ends, and it ends here, at the edge of a question that feels larger than the tools currently available to answer it, and that sits quietly at the intersection of biology and something not yet named. Phosphorus is essential to life. It is part of every DNA molecule in every living cell in your body, and in every tree in every forest. And in many soils, phosphorus exists in forms that roots cannot directly absorb. It sits locked in mineral bonds, present but inaccessible. The fungal threads of the mycorrhizal network secrete specific enzymes and acids that break those bonds, releasing phosphorus into forms the root can receive. This transfer happens through protein channels in the root cell membrane, channels so narrow they admit only specific molecules, a threshold measured in fractions of a nanometer. Through that almost unimaginably small opening, the forest receives one of the chemical foundations of life itself. In rocks more than 400 million years old, preserved in the ancient cherts of Scotland and elsewhere, scientists have found fossilized fungal threads still visible inside fossilized plant root cells. The structures are recognizable. The intimacy of the relationship is preserved in stone. What existed then and what exists now, threading through the roots of the trees in every living forest, are not merely similar, they are the same relationship, continuous across a span of time so vast that every human civilization, every language ever spoken, every city ever built, fits inside it without filling even a fraction of its length. The network beneath a forest is, in a sense, older than the soil it inhabits. When an insect population moves through a forest, feeding on leaves, the trees do not simply endure. Above ground, they produce defensive chemicals that make their leaves less palatable. Below ground, something else is happening simultaneously. Chemical signals are entering the network and moving outward to neighboring trees, which begin producing their own defenses before the insects arrive. This advance response has been documented. The signal travels faster than the infestation. The trees on the far side of the warning are, in some measurable sense, ready. Whether the initiating tree sends this signal intentionally, whether intention is even a meaningful concept at this level of biology, is a question science holds with honest uncertainty. You are breathing right now, and somewhere, in a forest you may never see, a tree is doing something that resembles breathing in its own slow, chemical way, drawing in, releasing, exchanging. The fungi connected to its roots are doing something similar, absorbing and releasing compounds across a network that has no central organ, no single point of control, no location where it is more itself than anywhere else. This distributed quality, the fact that the network is equally present everywhere it exists, equally active, equally real, is part of what makes it difficult to describe using the vocabulary built for organisms with centers, with hearts, with a somewhere they live most of all. The oldest mycorrhizal lineages reproduce asexually. They do not exchange genetic material the way most organisms do. They divide and extend and persist, carrying the same genetic information they have held for hundreds of millions of years, unchanged, in a way that almost nothing else alive can claim. These arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi are, genetically speaking, among the most conservative living things on Earth. Organisms that found an arrangement so successful they have had almost no reason to alter it. They exist today, in the roots of the grasses outside your window, in the soil of every garden, in the forest floor of every continent, carrying ancient instructions in threads too small to see. A tree's immune system is not housed in one place. It is distributed through bark and resin, and leaf chemistry and root secretions, a whole body response to threat. And when that tree is connected to the mycorrhizal network, its immune responses are measurably stronger. Compounds that defend against pathogens appear in higher concentrations. Stress responses are more rapid. The tree, in connection with its fungal partners, is biologically more resilient than it is alone. Whether the network provides this benefit directly, or whether connection itself produces some deeper physiological change in the tree, is something researchers are actively and carefully exploring. The result is confirmed. The full mechanism remains a question the forest keeps turning over in its roots. When a forest is diverse, when it holds many species of tree and many species of fungus in an intricate and long-established web of relationship, something happens to its resilience. Disturbances that would damage a simpler system are absorbed more gently. The network finds alternative pathways. Resources reroute. The community compensates in ways that no single species could manage alone. This resilience is measurable and has been confirmed across multiple forest types and multiple kinds of stress. And it depends on diversity, on the presence of many different partners, each with slightly different strengths and tolerances. The forest's ability to endure is, in this sense, a direct expression of how many different kinds of life it has managed to hold together. The Wood Wide Web has no center. If you tried to find the place where it begins, you would find only more network. If you tried to find the place where it makes its decisions, you would find only chemistry, only exchange, only the quiet and continuous movement of materials between living things. There is no brain, there is no hub. There is no location in the forest where the network is more itself than anywhere else. It exists as a whole, present everywhere it exists simultaneously. And this quality, this centerlessness, is part of what makes it so difficult to hold in the imagination. We are accustomed to things that have a middle. The Wood Wide Web simply does not. Zinc, copper, iron. These trace elements are essential to tree growth, required in small but precise amounts for the proteins and enzymes that keep a tree's chemistry functioning. In many soils, these minerals exist at depths or in forms that fine tree roots cannot reach. The fungal network reaches them. Threads extend downward and outward into mineral layers far beyond the root zone, dissolving and transporting these elements back toward the waiting roots. This service, this mineral ferrying through darkness, is one of the network's less celebrated functions, quieter than the carbon sharing and the warning signals, but no less foundational to the lives of the trees it connects. It is possible that without mycorrhizal fungi, forests as we know them could not exist. That statement is not a dramatic claim. It is, in the view of many researchers, simply an accurate one. The partnership is so foundational, so woven into the biology of trees from their cellular architecture outward, that removing it does not merely weaken the forest, it changes what the forest is. This is why the discovery of the Wood Wide Web was not merely an interesting addition to forest science. It reframed what a tree is. A tree, it turns out, is not a solitary organism that happens to share soil with fungi. It is part of something larger, something older, something that does not have a clean edge. In the deep shade of a closed canopy, where a seedling has just pushed its first leaves into air that holds almost no light, the network is already present in its roots. The fungal threads arrived before the seedling's leaves opened, colonizing the root tips in the first weeks of growth, establishing a connection to the broader network before the young tree has had a single successful day of photosynthesis. This early arrival of the fungi, their presence at the very beginning of the seedling's life, means the tree is never, in a healthy forest, truly alone. It enters the world already held by something older and wider than itself. Most of the fungal species in forest soils have never been formally identified. Estimates suggest that the number of fungal species on Earth may be in the millions, and the vast majority remain unnamed, unstudied, unknown to science. The Wood Wide Web is built partly from organisms science has not yet described. We have confirmed its existence, traced its functions, measured its effects, and we have done all of this with incomplete knowledge of the organisms that form it. The way you might describe the movement of a river while still being uncertain of all the tributaries that feed it. The network is real. It is also, still, largely a mystery. There is a quality to old forest soil that young plantation soil simply does not have. A depth of complexity, a layering of fungal diversity, and accumulated organic matter and mineral chemistry that took not years but centuries to develop. Some ecologists describe this as a kind of relational history encoded in the soil itself, a record of every exchange, every partnership, every season of growth and death and regrowth that the forest has moved through. You cannot create this quickly. You cannot purchase it or plant it. It accumulates, slowly, in forests that are left to continue their long conversation without interruption. And when it is lost, what is lost with it is not merely soil, it is time. When you find a mushroom in a forest, standing quietly in the leaf litter, cap curved toward the light, you are looking at something that is not quite the organism itself. The mushroom is a fruiting body, a temporary structure sent upward from a living network that may extend in every direction for meters, for acres, for distances the mushroom above gives no hint of. The organism is below. It has always been below. The mushroom is simply the moment when the network briefly surfaces into a world of light and air and visibility, releases its spores, and retreats again into the dark where it has always lived most fully. What you see is a glimpse. What is real is the part you cannot see. A single fungal thread, navigating through soil, is not moving randomly. It follows gradients. It senses the faint chemical trails left by nearby roots, the subtle shifts in moisture and mineral concentration, the presence of other fungal threads ahead of it. It grows toward what it needs, and away from what would harm it, making what appear to be decisions at a scale so small they are invisible to any eye. Whether this navigation constitutes anything like perception remains an open question in biology. What has been confirmed is the directional sensitivity itself. The fact that these threads, thinner than a human hair, move through darkness with a specificity that simple diffusion cannot explain. Among the thousands of fungal species that form mycorrhizal partnerships with trees, some are specialists. They will partner with one tree species and no other, a loyalty so precise it has been refined across millions of years of shared evolution. The oak and its particular fungi, the pine and its own distinct partners. These exclusive relationships mean that when a specialist tree species disappears from a landscape, it takes its fungal partners with it, and those fungi, in turn, may be essential to the seedlings of that same tree species attempting to establish themselves generations later. The loss of one partner echoes forward through time in ways that are slow, quiet, and very difficult to undo. In times of widespread stress, something shifts in the chemistry of the forest below ground. Trees that are resource-rich begin sending more carbon into the network. Fungal threads in nutrient-poor zones grow more actively towards stressed roots. The whole system seems to lean, gently, toward balance. Researchers have observed this compensatory behavior in drought conditions, in post-fire recovery, in forests recovering from insect damage. Whether it emerges from the individual actions of many separate organisms responding to shared chemical signals, or whether something more integrated is happening across the network as a whole, is a question that current science approaches with careful honesty and genuine curiosity. In the far north, where the growing season is short and the soil stays cold deep into summer, mycorrhizal fungi do something that matters enormously for the planet. They hold carbon in the frozen ground. The organic matter they help build in boreal and Arctic soils represents one of the largest carbon stores on Earth, accumulated over thousands of years of slow fungal and plant growth. As temperatures rise and these soils begin to warm, the ancient carbon held within them becomes vulnerable. The network that helped store it is itself sensitive to temperature change. The consequences of this shift are still being studied, carefully, and with a growing urgency that sits quietly beneath the calm language of the science describing it. Trees send electrical signals, not in the rapid and dramatic way of animal nerves, but slowly, diffusely, in pulses of changing ion concentration that move through their tissues in response to damage, to touch, to changes in light. Some researchers have found evidence that analogous electrical-like signals may travel through mycorrhizal networks between trees. The full nature of these signals, what information they carry, how they are initiated, how neighboring trees respond to them, remains at the edge of what current instruments can reliably measure. What is known is that the network is not merely a chemical highway. It may also be, in some quieter sense, an electrical one, where all the animals on Earth, every insect, every bird, every fish, every mammal, every creature that moves through the world with intention and hunger. Then consider that the total mass of fungal mycelium in the world's forests may exceed that combined weight. The number itself is an estimate, and estimates at this scale carry uncertainty. But the order of magnitude has been supported by multiple independent analyses. Beneath the visible world of animals and trees and weather, something vast and still and almost entirely invisible holds more of life's substance than anything that moves. It has been there since before movement was invented. It will likely be there long after. The arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, the oldest lineage of fungal partners, have not reproduced sexually for hundreds of millions of years. They carry their ancient genetic instructions intact, unshuffled by the recombination that gives most organisms their variability. And yet they persist. They thrive in the roots of grasses and crops and wildflowers and forest trees across every continent. Their success suggests that what they offer and what they receive is so precisely suited to the needs of the plants they partner with that change itself has had nothing to improve upon. They are, in a biological sense, a perfected arrangement, still performing today the same function they performed in a world that no longer exists in any other form. A tree connected to the mycorrhizal network is not simply better fed, it is, in a measurable sense, better defended. Pathogens that would move through isolated trees find more resistance in network-connected ones. The production of antimicrobial compounds in the roots and bark of connected trees is higher. The speed of the immune response is faster. Some researchers believe the fungi themselves produce compounds that directly suppress soil pathogens in the rhizosphere around the roots. Others think the benefit comes from the improved nutrition the network provides, a well-fed tree being a more resilient one. Both mechanisms may be true simultaneously. The forest, here as elsewhere, does not restrict itself to simple explanations. Cut a forest into fragments, leave patches of trees surrounded by roads and fields and cleared land. The trees in those fragments still stand. They still photosynthesize. They still produce leaves and seeds and the quiet chemistry of growth. But something is missing. The fungal diversity in fragmented forest patches is measurably lower than in continuous forest. The network is thinner, simpler, less connected, and the trees in those fragments, over years and decades, show it. Their growth slows. Their recovery from stress is weaker. Their seedlings survive at lower rates. The forest looks the same from a distance, but beneath the surface, the conversation has grown quieter, and some of the voices in it are already gone. The interface where a fungal thread enters a root cell is one of the most chemically complex locations in all of plant biology. At this boundary, called the symbiotic interface, both organisms release proteins, enzymes, and signaling molecules in a continuous and intricate exchange. The root cell actively reshapes its own membrane to accommodate the fungal thread, building new cellular structures to increase the surface area of contact between them. This active reshaping is not passive acceptance. The root cell is participating, preparing, creating space. It is, in the quietest possible sense, reaching toward what is reaching toward it. This mutual movement toward contact is written into the genes of both organisms, a shared instruction older than the partnership itself. No two forests carry the same network. A forest in British Columbia holds a different constellation of fungal species than one in Borneo, or in Finland, or in the ancient woodlands of Central Africa. Each network has been shaped by its own particular history, its own sequence of fires and floods and droughts and recoveries, its own particular assembly of tree species, and their generations of chemical conversation with the soil. The network is not a blueprint repeated across landscapes. It is a biography, specific to the place and the time and the accumulated living of every organism that has ever participated in it. Every forest floor is, in this sense, a record that cannot be copied. When you walk through a forest old enough to have grown without interruption, the fungi beneath your feet may be the direct descendants, through continuous vegetative growth, of organisms present when the first trees of that forest were saplings. Not descendants in the way children descend from parents, but extensions. The same living thread grown longer through centuries without break. The mycelium does not have a lifespan in the way an animal does. It extends. It branches. It persists as long as its conditions allow. The thread beneath your foot may be, in a biological sense, continuous with something that was alive before the oldest human building still standing was built. Nitrogen, the element that forms the backbone of proteins and the rungs of DNA, cycles through forests in ways the mycorrhizal network quietly mediates. Bacteria in the soil fix atmospheric nitrogen into forms that plants can use, and fungal threads serve as intermediaries in this transfer, absorbing nitrogen compounds and carrying them toward roots that cannot reach the zones where bacterial activity is highest. This three-way relationship between tree, fungus, and bacterium is part of what makes forest soil so biologically productive. Remove any one of the three, and the cycle slows. The forest's fertility is not a property of any single organism. It is a property of the relationship between many. A mother tree can support hundreds of seedlings simultaneously through the network, hundreds of individual young trees, each receiving some portion of what the older tree releases into the shared mycelium. The logistics of this, considered in purely physical terms, are extraordinary. A single organism, rooted in one place, channeling resources in dozens of directions at once toward recipients it has never directly touched. And the seedlings that receive this support show measurably better survival rates, measurably faster growth, measurably greater resilience in their first years of life. The effect of the mother tree on the next generation of the forest is real and documented, and, in the gentlest possible sense of the word, remarkable. Some trees appear to direct resources preferentially through the network, not merely toward the most stressed recipients, but toward specific individuals in ways that cannot be fully explained by proximity or chemistry alone. The observation is careful and contested, and researchers are precise about the limits of what the data shows. But the pattern, in some studies, suggests something that sits uncomfortably at the edge of what biology currently has language for. Not intelligence, not intention in any human sense. Something quieter than both of those words, and perhaps more interesting, a tendency in living systems to behave as though relationship has a direction, as though some connections across the vast web of the forest matter more than others. The scale at which mycorrhizal networks influence global carbon cycles is only beginning to be appreciated. A forest's capacity to absorb and store carbon depends not just on how many trees it holds, but on how well those trees are supported by their fungal partners. Network-connected forests grow faster, survive longer, and hold more carbon in their wood and roots and soil. The fungal threads themselves store carbon. The organic matter they help build in the soil stores carbon for centuries. And yet, in the computational models that scientists use to project the future of Earth's climate, this fungal contribution is often simplified or absent entirely. The network beneath the forest is doing work that the larger world has not yet fully learned to see. Long before isotope tracers and molecular biology gave scientists the tools to confirm what happens beneath forest soil, people who lived within and alongside forests described the trees as connected, as communicating, as existing in relationships of mutual support that went beyond competition. Indigenous knowledge systems across multiple continents held this understanding for generations. The Western scientific tradition, for much of its history, set these accounts aside. The last few decades of mycorrhizal research have returned, in the language of verified data, to a picture of the forest that some knowledge systems never abandoned. That convergence is worth sitting with quietly, without rushing to any conclusion about what it means. Healthy mycorrhizal networks do not merely feed the trees above them, they shape the movement of water through the entire landscape they inhabit. The fungal threads and the organic matter they help build increase the water-holding capacity of soil significantly. In a forest with an intact network, more rainfall is absorbed and held in the ground rather than running off the surface. This retained water feeds streams more slowly and steadily through dry periods. It moderates the temperature of the soil. It supports the microbial life that depends on consistent moisture. The network is, in this sense, part of the forest's relationship with rain, a quiet mediator between the sky and the ground, a chemical signal traveling through a mycorrhizal network in response to drought may arrive at a neighboring tree within hours. The tree that receives it, having experienced no water stress itself, begins adjusting its water use behavior in response. It begins closing the small pores in its leaves, called stomata, more readily. It begins directing more resources toward its own root growth. It prepares, chemically and structurally, for a difficulty it has not yet encountered. This anticipatory response has been documented and confirmed. It suggests that the network does not merely connect trees to shared resources, it connects them to shared information, to a kind of distributed awareness of the forest's condition that no single tree could hold alone. In autumn, when the forest turns, something is happening beneath the color. As trees prepare to release their leaves, they withdraw nitrogen and phosphorus from the leaf tissue, pulling nutrients back through the branches and into the roots before the leaves fall. Some researchers believe the mycorrhizal network participates in this seasonal recollection, helping to redistribute what the trees recover before the canopy drops. The autumn forest, in this light, is not simply dying back, it is reorganizing. It is moving its resources inward and downward into the dark where the network holds them through winter, ready for the first warmth of spring to set them moving again. Beneath your feet, in soil that looks simply like earth, fungal threads are doing something that took evolution hundreds of millions of years to perfect. They are dissolving rock, not quickly, not dramatically, but at the molecular level, steadily and continuously, secreting acids and enzymes that break the chemical bonds holding minerals inside stone, releasing calcium, potassium, magnesium into the soil water, where roots and threads can reach them. This process, called mineral weathering, is one of the ways the living world slowly transforms geology into biology, turning the inert substance of mountains into the chemistry of leaves and roots, and the quiet breathing of forests. The fungi have been doing this work since before there were forests to feed. In the forests of Europe, a particular intimacy exists between oak trees and truffle fungi, an intimacy old enough to have outlasted the ice that once covered the continent. The truffles fruit underground, producing their aromatic bodies in the root zones of their oak partners, and the oaks, in turn, have shaped their root architecture around the presence of their fungal companions across generations of mutual growth. This pairing has persisted through climatic shifts that reshaped the landscape entirely. The truffle and the oak found each other again after the ice receded, or perhaps never fully lost each other through it. Their partnership, a quiet thread of continuity running beneath the history of the continent. A tree preparing to partner with fungi does not wait for contact. Before any fungal thread arrives at its roots, the tree begins releasing chemical compounds called strigolactones into the surrounding soil. These compounds stimulate fungal spore germination and direct fungal growth toward the root. The tree is, in a chemical sense, calling. It is sending a signal into the soil around it that says, in the language of molecules, that it is ready, that it is open. The fungi receive this signal and respond by growing toward the source. The partnership begins not at the moment of contact but earlier, in the space between the root and the thread, in the chemistry of anticipation before any meeting has occurred. Deep in a forest during a late summer drought, something quietly redistributes. The mycorrhizal threads, extending into deeper, moister soil layers, begin transferring water toward the roots of trees in the drier upper layers. This hydraulic redistribution, as researchers call it, moves water not just from soil to root, but laterally between trees, across the network, from zones of relative moisture to zones of relative dryness. The trees receiving this water do not know its source. They receive it as they receive all network gifts, through the quiet chemistry of root and thread, with no awareness of the distance it has traveled or the organisms it has passed through to reach them. There is a plant in North American forests that has abandoned photosynthesis entirely. Ghost pipe, also called Indian pipe, grows pale and waxy from the forest floor, without chlorophyll, without green, without any capacity to make its own food from light. It survives by tapping into the mycorrhizal network connecting nearby trees, drawing carbon that the trees have produced and the fungi have carried. It is, in ecological terms, a mycoheterotroph, an organism that lives entirely on the generosity of the network. Whether the network gives to it willingly, whether the fungi and the trees are aware of this quiet borrower in their midst, is a question the forest does not answer. The ghost pipe simply grows, pale and still, in the deep shade where the network is most dense. Remove a tree from the network experimentally, sever its fungal connections, and something measurable happens within days. The tree's production of stress hormones rises. Its stomata behave differently. Its chemistry shifts in ways that parallel the responses of an animal experiencing isolation. Researchers are careful about the language they use here, careful not to project human experience onto plant biology. But the measurable changes are real, and they suggest that connection, for a tree, is not merely useful. It is in some biological sense expected, built into the tree's physiology, as a baseline condition, a normal state that the tree's chemistry is calibrated around. Severance is, in the language of the tree's own molecules, a disruption. The soil beneath an old-growth forest is not a uniform medium. It is layered, zoned, differentiated by depth and moisture and chemistry into distinct horizons, each with its own fungal community, its own microbial population, its own role in the larger system. The mycorrhizal network does not exist in just one of these layers. It threads through several of them simultaneously, connecting the chemistry of different soil depths into a single living system. A nutrient released by weathering rock in the deep mineral layers can travel upward through fungal threads, through multiple soil horizons, into the root of a tree whose canopy shades the surface far above. The network is, in this sense, a vertical bridge as much as a horizontal one. In forests recovering from fire, one of the first biological events to occur in the cooling soil is not the germination of seeds. It is the regrowth of fungal threads. Before the first seedling pushes through the ash, before the first green shoots emerge from root crowns, the mycelium is already extending through the changed soil, re-establishing connections, preparing the ground for what is coming. When the seeds do germinate, they germinate into a soil already beginning to hold the architecture of the network again. The forest's recovery begins not with what is visible, but with what is invisible. Not with the first green thing, but with the quiet, underground preparation for it. Old-growth forests store more carbon per unit area than any other terrestrial ecosystem. This is partly because old trees are large, and large trees hold more carbon in their wood. But it is also because old forests have the richest and deepest mycorrhizal networks, and those networks support more extensive root systems, more stable soil organic matter, more layers of living and decomposing material than younger forests can sustain. The age of the network is inseparable from the carbon-holding capacity of the forest above it. When an old-growth forest is cleared, what is lost is not just the trees. It is centuries of accumulated fungal architecture, a carbon infrastructure that cannot be replanted or restored on any human timescale. At the place in the soil where one fungal individual ends and another begins, something interesting happens. Different mycorrhizal networks do not simply merge. They negotiate. They test each other's chemistry. Compatible networks may fuse and exchange materials. Incompatible ones maintain boundaries, chemical lines in the dark soil that neither crosses. Researchers studying these fungal boundaries have found that they are not static. They shift over time as conditions change, as one network expands and another retreats, as the trees above send different signals into the soil. The forest floor, invisible beneath your feet, is a landscape of territories and alliances and quiet renegotiations conducted entirely in the language of chemistry. Every forest carries its own particular silence, and within that silence, within the specific arrangement of species and ages and soil types that makes one forest different from every other, the network has taken a form that is entirely its own. The fungi that thread through a redwood forest are not the same as those beneath a miombo woodland in Zambia, or a beech forest in Germany, or a cloud forest in Costa Rica. Each network is the living record of a particular place's particular history. In this sense, the Wood Wide Web is not one web. It is countless webs, each one irreplaceable, each one a biography of its landscape, written in threads too fine to see. The mycorrhizal fungi that partnered with the forests of the ancient world did not simply vanish when those forests changed. Some of their lineages survived, generation by generation, in the roots of whatever plants remained, waiting for conditions that would allow them to expand again. When new forests grew, these ancient fungal lineages were present in the soil, available to partner with the arriving trees. The fungi we find today in living forests may carry, in their cellular chemistry, the memory of partnerships with trees that no longer exist, instructions for relationships whose other participant has long since been replaced by something different. The network persists across extinctions in ways we are only beginning to understand. Nitrogen moves through the mycorrhizal network in forms that have been fixed, transformed, and passed between multiple organisms before they reach a tree root. A nitrogen atom that began as part of the atmosphere may pass through a soil bacterium, then through fungal threads, then across the symbiotic interface into a root cell, and eventually become part of a leaf protein performing photosynthesis high in the canopy. The journey of that single atom, from air to leaf, involves a community of organisms and a network of relationships that span the entire depth of the soil column. The leaf, visible and sunlit, is the final expression of a process that began in the invisible dark far below it. When a mother tree is removed from a forest, what happens to the network is not simply that one node disappears. The connections she held, the pathways through which she was routing resources to dozens of seedlings, the fungal partnerships she had cultivated across centuries of root growth, all of these are disrupted simultaneously. Seedlings that were receiving support through her begin to show increased stress within a single growing season. The network finds some alternative routes, reroutes some of what was flowing through her, but the compensation is partial. The loss echoes outward through the living system in ways that unfold slowly, over years, in the growth rings of trees that are still standing and that carry, in their wood, the record of what changed. Some ecologists have begun arguing that the health of a forest's mycorrhizal network should be considered a primary indicator of ecosystem vitality, more informative in some respects than the visible condition of the trees above. A forest can look healthy from above, while its network is in serious decline below. Its fungal diversity, reduced by pollution or compaction or fragmentation in ways that will only become apparent in the tree layer, years or decades later. The network is the infrastructure on which the visible forest depends, and its condition is a leading indicator, an early signal of what the canopy has not yet shown. Learning to read that signal requires looking at what is underground, at what is invisible, at what the forest keeps most carefully out of sight. A dying tree does not become silent in the network. In the months before a tree's death, as its root chemistry changes and its capacity to photosynthesize diminishes, the flow of carbon through its connections begins to shift. Resources that once moved inward, toward the tree, begin moving outward, away from it, into the network, toward the living. This reversal has been documented in research settings and observed in natural forests. It suggests that the relationship between a tree and its network does not simply end when the tree's life does. Something continues to move, something continues to be given. The tree's final contribution to the forest is made not through its seeds or its falling wood, but through the chemistry of its ending, passed outward through threads in the dark. The mycorrhizal network regulates more than what moves between trees. It regulates the chemistry of the water that eventually leaves the forest. The mineral content of streams running through old-growth forests reflects the filtering and releasing activity of the fungal networks in the soils above them. Calcium, magnesium, dissolved organic carbon. The concentrations of all of these in forest streams are shaped partly by the fungal communities through which the water has passed. The network's influence does not stop at the edge of the forest. It extends, invisibly, into the water cycle of the entire watershed, into the chemistry of rivers, into the slow metabolism of landscapes far beyond the trees themselves. Trees at the edge of a forest face conditions that interior trees do not. More wind, more direct sun, more dramatic temperature swings, more exposure to the air beyond the canopy's shelter. Researchers studying edge trees have found that these more stressed individuals receive measurably more network support than their interior counterparts. More fungal connections, more resource transfer from connected neighbors. It is as though the network senses vulnerability at its periphery and compensates for it, directing more of what flows through the system toward the places where the system is most exposed. The mechanism that produces this compensation, whether it emerges from the chemical signals of stressed edge trees or from something more distributed, is still being carefully examined. The wood wide web is not merely a feature of forests. It is, in a meaningful sense, a condition of them. Remove it, and the forest does not simply become a forest without a network. It becomes something different at a fundamental level, a collection of individual trees in shared soil, rather than an integrated community with a shared physiology. The distinction matters. A collection of individual trees can be replanted. An integrated forest community, with its centuries of fungal architecture and its accumulated relational complexity, cannot. What takes a weekend to destroy has taken, in many cases, longer than all of recorded human history to build. This is not a reason for despair. It is simply one of the quieter truths the forest holds, patiently, in its ancient and continuing dark. Walk to the edge of any old forest and look down at the ground beneath your feet. What you are standing on is not simply earth. It is a threshold, the upper surface of a living system with no clear boundary, no bottom that science has fully mapped, no edge where the network ends and the merely mineral world begins. The wood wide web does not stop at the tree line or the root tip or the soil horizon. It grades, slowly, into the deeper geology, its threads thinning but not disappearing, reaching into spaces between rock particles where the chemistry of the living and the non-living world conduct their longest, slowest conversations. You are standing on the roof of something vast and ancient, and still entirely present. In the dark beneath a forest, a fungal thread is dissolving the surface of a mineral grain, releasing phosphorus, one molecule at a time. This is not a rapid process. A single thread working on a single grain across a single season may release only a vanishingly small amount. But multiply that thread by the miles of mycelium in a single handful of soil, and multiply that handful by the acres of forest above, and the cumulative release becomes one of the primary ways that the mineral wealth locked inside rock becomes available to living things. The fungi are, in the most literal sense, slowly turning stone into forest, one invisible chemical bond at a time. The mycorrhizal fungi of tropical rainforests belong to lineages so ancient that the continents beneath them have moved since those lineages first formed. What is now South America was once joined to Africa, and the fungal partners of their earliest forests shared that single landmass. As the continents separated, the forests on each drifted apart, evolved apart, diversified apart. But some of the fungal lineages that thread through Amazonian soil today carry, in their cellular chemistry, instructions that predate the Atlantic Ocean. The network beneath the rainforest is older than the geography it inhabits. It has outlasted the very shape of the world that formed it. Every exchange between a tree and its fungal partner involves negotiation at the molecular level. The tree does not simply give carbon and receive phosphorus as though the transaction were fixed. It adjusts the composition and quantity of what it releases, depending on how well the fungus is delivering in return. Fungal partners that provide more phosphorus receive more carbon. Those that deliver less receive less. This dynamic allocation has been confirmed experimentally, and it means the relationship is not a fixed contract but a continuous renegotiation, conducted in real time, in the chemistry of the root zone, across the entire life of both organisms. The forest beneath the soil is, in this sense, not static. It is always in the middle of a conversation. Boreal forests, the great northern belts of spruce and pine and larch that encircle the upper latitudes of the planet, hold an extraordinary amount of the world's terrestrial carbon. They hold it in their wood, in their deep organic soils, and in the frozen layers beneath them. The mycorrhizal networks that support these forests are adapted to cold, to the short summers and long frozen winters of the high latitudes, to conditions that would collapse the networks of warmer forests. As temperatures rise across the boreal zone, these cold-adapted fungal communities face pressures they have not encountered across the span of human history. What happens to the carbon they help hold when the conditions they evolved within begin to change is a question whose answer is still forming. Something moves through the wood wide web that is not carbon, not phosphorus, not water, not any single named compound. It is a pattern of electrical-like charge changes, measurable with sensitive instruments, traveling through the living threads of the network in response to stimuli that may include touch, temperature, and chemical signals arriving from connected trees. Researchers are careful to distinguish this from the rapid electrical signaling of animal nervous systems. The speeds are different, the mechanisms are different. The scale of what it does is still largely unmapped, and yet the signals are there, real and repeatable in controlled conditions, moving through the network in ways that suggest the forest's conversation is not conducted in chemistry alone. A single mycorrhizal mushroom, fruiting above the soil on an autumn morning, releases spores in numbers that make individual counting meaningless. Each spore is a fraction of a millimeter across, capable of being carried by wind or water or animal far from its origin. Each one carries the complete genetic and chemical instructions for forming a new fungal network with a compatible root. Some of these spores remain viable in the soil for decades, waiting in the dark for the right chemical signal, the right root, the right moment to germinate, and begin the slow process of partnership again. The forest plans for its own continuity, in increments of time and space that have no equivalent in the human experience of planning. The mycorrhizal fungi that existed before the last ice age were not simply replaced when the glaciers advanced. Some survived in refugia, small pockets of ice-free land where their tree partners also persisted through the cold. When the ice retreated and the forests expanded northward and upward again, the fungi spread with them, recolonizing newly exposed ground alongside the trees, whose roots they had never left. The forests that exist today in the high latitudes are, in part, the descendants of those refugial communities. and the networks beneath them carry something of that long survival in their structure, a resilience accumulated through tens of thousands of years of endurance in reduced and marginal conditions. A forest in which the mycorrhizal network is intact recovers from pathogen outbreaks measurably faster than one in which the network is degraded. The connected trees share not only resources, but also, it appears, resistance. A tree that has mounted a successful chemical defense against a particular pathogen may release compounds through the network that prime its neighbors to mount a similar response before the pathogen reaches them. The forest, in this way, has something that resembles a distributed immune memory, not housed in any single organism, but spread through the network, available to any tree connected to the system. Whether this constitutes immunity in any strict biological sense remains an open and carefully held question. The threads of the mycorrhizal network weigh almost nothing. A meter of fungal hyphae, if you could isolate and weigh it, would register as a trace on the most sensitive scale. And yet these weightless threads bridge trees separated by many meters, carry carbon across distances that a root tip could never travel, and sustain living connections between organisms whose above-ground parts never touch. The disproportion between the physical insignificance of the individual thread and the ecological significance of the network it belongs to is one of the quieter astonishments of forest biology. What the threads weigh is almost nothing. What they hold together is, in the most literal sense, the forest itself. There is no word in any language, as far as anyone has recorded, that means exactly what the Wood Wide Web does. There are words for networks, for communities, for communication, for sharing, for symbiosis, but none of these words, alone or combined, fully captures the particular quality of what happens beneath a forest, the simultaneity of it, the ancientness of it, the way it operates below all visibility and yet sustains everything visible above it. Language arrives at the edge of this and finds itself reaching. What the network is something that has been doing what it does for far longer than words have existed. It does not need a name. It continues regardless. Isotope tracing has allowed scientists to follow individual carbon atoms from the moment a tree fixes them through photosynthesis, down through the trunk and roots, into the fungal network, across meters of dark soil, and into the tissues of a neighboring seedling. The journey of a single carbon atom through this system can take days. It crosses the boundary between two kingdoms of life, passes through chemical transformations at multiple points, and arrives in a body entirely different from the one in which it began. Every leaf on every tree in an old-growth forest contains carbon that has made this journey. Carbon that was once part of another tree, part of a fungal thread, part of the shared chemistry of a community whose members are in continuous, invisible exchange. Some mycorrhizal fungi have been preserved in amber, their threads still visible inside the root tissue of the plant they were partnering with at the moment of preservation, frozen mid-exchange in resin that hardened into stone over millions of years. These amber-preserved partnerships are windows into forest relationships that predate the existence of most of the tree species alive today. The fungi inside them are recognizable. Their structures are the same. The intimacy of the root-thread interface is visible in the ancient resin, with the same geometry it holds in the living soil of a forest you could walk in this evening. Time has changed everything around them. Inside the amber, the partnership continues, permanently, in the form it always held. In years when tree populations across a forest synchronize their seed production, releasing vast quantities of seed simultaneously in what ecologists call a masting event, the mycorrhizal network may play a role in coordinating that synchrony. Trees connected through the network share chemical signals that reflect environmental conditions, light levels, temperature patterns, nutrient availability. Some researchers hypothesize that these shared signals help trees across a landscape arrive at the same reproductive decision in the same season. The hypothesis is not fully confirmed, and the alternative explanation, that trees respond independently to the same environmental cues, remains equally viable. Here, as in many places where the network's behavior is most interesting, the forest keeps the final answer to itself. When drought arrives in a forest, the network does not simply transmit distress. It responds to it. Fungal threads extend more actively into deeper soil layers where moisture is higher. The density of connections between trees increases as carbon allocation into the fungal network rises. Trees that are less stressed begin routing more resources toward those that are more so. The whole system shifts its behavior in response to the shared condition of its members, not through any central coordination, not through any organism aware of the whole, but through the aggregate response of countless individual organisms, each responding to its immediate chemical environment. The result, at the scale of the forest, looks like something far more coordinated than any of its parts. The forests that existed before widespread industrial land use were connected by mycorrhizal networks of a diversity and continuity that most forests living today have never known. The fragmentation of forest landscapes over the past few centuries has not merely reduced the area of forest, it has reduced the connectivity of the networks within what remains, isolating fungal communities that were once part of continent-spanning systems of exchange. The trees alive in those fragments are, in a biological sense, living with a reduced inheritance, a simplified version of the relational richness their ancestors inhabited. What has been lost is not merely habitat, it is a depth of connection that took geological time to build and human generations to diminish. A root does not grow randomly through soil. As it extends into the dark, it is guided by gradients of moisture, of mineral concentration, of chemical signals left by other roots and fungal threads. Over the lifetime of a tree, its root architecture is shaped as much by its fungal partners as by its own genetics. In zones where the mycorrhizal network is dense and active, the tree grows fewer fine roots of its own, trusting the fungi to gather what those roots would otherwise seek. The tree's body is, in this way, partly shaped by its relationships, its physical form, a record of the partnerships it has relied upon across its years of growth. Every root system is, quietly, a portrait of belonging. The Great Bear Rainforest on the coast of British Columbia holds some of the oldest and most continuously active mycorrhizal networks on the continent. Beneath trees that were alive when the first European ships arrived on that coast, the networks thread through soil that has not been plowed or compacted or chemically altered in any human era. Some of the fungal communities in that soil may represent unbroken lineages, stretching back through thousands of years of continuous forest, through climate shifts and storms, and the slow accumulation of a biological complexity that has had the rarest of gifts, enough time to fully become itself. Walking above it, you are walking above something that has been in uninterrupted conversation for longer than any human institution has existed. Above ground, trees communicate through the air in volatile organic compounds, releasing chemical signals that neighboring trees can detect and respond to through their leaves and bark. Below ground, the mycorrhizal network carries a different set of signals through an entirely different medium. These two systems of forest communication operate simultaneously, in parallel, in different physical dimensions of the same forest. A tree under stress may be sending signals both upward into the air and downward into the soil at the same moment, reaching neighbors through two distinct channels, using two distinct chemical vocabularies. The forest communicates, in other words, in more than one language, and science has so far translated only fragments of either. The depth of a forest's mycorrhizal network is constrained by soil depth. by oxygen availability, by temperature and moisture gradients that change with depth. But within those constraints, the network extends as far as conditions allow, threading through every horizon of the soil column that can support fungal life. In very deep soils, in the ancient weathered profiles of tropical landscapes, fungal threads have been found at depths of several meters, far below where most researchers initially thought to look. The network reaches deeper than the roots of most trees, into zones of mineral rock and ancient sediment, continuing its slow work of dissolution and transport in darkness that has not seen light since the soil above it was stone. A fallen log on the forest floor is not an ending. It is a transformation, a slow and patient giving back that can last for a century or more. As the wood softens and the bark loosens and the first fungi begin their work of decomposition, the log becomes a donor to the living network around it. Carbon stored in its wood for decades re-enters the soil in forms the mycorrhizal network can carry to living roots. Minerals locked inside its fibers are released into the soil water. Mosses and seedlings establish themselves in its softening surface, their young roots reaching down into the network waiting below. What looks like decay is, from the forest's perspective, simply another form of circulation. Another way the community moves what it holds toward where it is needed. The total mass of fungal mycelium woven through the world's forest soils is a number that resists easy comprehension. When researchers attempt to estimate it, the figures that emerge place it in the same order of magnitude as the combined mass of all living animals on Earth. This is not a poetic exaggeration. It is a carefully derived estimate, subject to revision as methods improve, but consistent across multiple independent analyses. Beneath every forest you have ever walked through, beneath every woodland glimpsed from a train window, beneath every stand of trees you have ever seen on a horizon, this vast invisible mass is present, working, exchanging, holding together the living world above it, in threads too fine to see and too fundamental to ignore. The mycorrhizal partnerships sustaining today's forests have persisted through events that reshaped the surface of the planet. Ice ages that buried entire continents under kilometers of glacier, volcanic winters that darkened the sky for years, mass extinctions that erased the majority of species alive at the time. Through all of these, in the refugia, in the surviving patches and pockets of life that held on through each catastrophe, the fungal networks persisted. They did not persist unchanged. They lost species, lost connections, lost the full complexity of what they had been. But they persisted. The network beneath a living forest today is the descendant of something that has survived everything the Earth has so far done, and continued regardless. At the molecular level, the proteins that govern the exchange of nutrients between a fungal thread and a root cell have been conserved across evolutionary time, with a fidelity that is, to a biologist, quietly extraordinary. The genes encoding these proteins in living mycorrhizal fungi today are recognizably similar to those found in organisms whose last common ancestor with modern plants lived more than 500 million years ago. This conservation suggests that the molecular handshake between plant and fungus, the precise biochemical agreement at the heart of the symbiosis, was so well suited to its purpose when it first formed that evolution has had almost no improvement to offer it in all the time since. Some solutions, it seems, are found once and kept. The trees of the Great Bear Rainforest hold something that cannot be measured in board feet or carbon tons, or any unit designed for extraction. Beneath trees whose rings record centuries of rain and drought and storm and stillness, the mycorrhizal networks thread through soil of an age and complexity that has no equivalent in any managed forest. Some of the fungal communities in that soil may represent unbroken continuity stretching back through thousands of years of forest life, through the retreating glaciers, through the slow recolonization of exposed coastline by the first returning trees. To walk above that soil is to walk above a conversation that has been continuous since before the oldest human memory reaches. The trees are listening. The fungi are speaking. Neither has ever stopped. Above the forest, trees release volatile chemical compounds into the air that neighboring trees can detect through their leaves and bark. Below the forest, the mycorrhizal network carries a parallel conversation through an entirely different medium, in the chemistry of water and mineral and carbon threading through dark soil. These two systems operate simultaneously in different physical dimensions of the same community, using different vocabularies to carry what may be overlapping messages. A tree under attack by insects may be signaling both upward into the air and downward into the soil at the same moment, speaking in two languages at once to an audience that can hear either or both. The forest, it appears, has always spoken more than we had instruments to hear. When a tree's mycorrhizal connections are intact, something changes in the architecture of its roots. It grows fewer fine exploratory roots of its own, allowing the fungal threads to perform the searching that its own root tips would otherwise conduct. This reduction is not a weakness. It is an efficiency, a biological trust expressed in the reallocation of growth energy toward wood and leaf and seed, rather than root exploration. The tree's body, in other words, reflects its relationships. Its physical form is partly shaped by what it relies upon, by the community it belongs to, by the accumulated trust of a partnership that has been reliable for so long that the tree's own genetics have adjusted to assume its presence. The root system of a connected tree is a portrait, in living tissue, of belonging. Scientists studying forest recovery after volcanic eruptions have found mycorrhizal fungi arriving on bare rock within years of the eruption, carried there by wind and water and animals, establishing themselves in the mineral substrate before any tree has taken root. They are, in the most fundamental sense, preparing the ground, weathering the rock, building the thin skin of altered mineral that a seedling's first root will need to find purchase in. The forest does not begin with a tree. It begins, quietly and invisibly, with the fungi that make it possible for a tree to arrive. The visible forest is always preceded by an invisible one, a network already forming in the dark before the first leaf has opened toward the light. The health of a forest's mycorrhizal network is now considered by some ecologists to be the truest available measure of that forest's vitality, more informative than the height of its canopy or the density of its understory or any visual assessment of its condition. A forest can appear thriving above ground while its network is in slow decline below, its fungal diversity quietly eroding under pressures that will not become visible in the trees for years or decades. The network is the infrastructure on which everything above it depends, and its condition is the earliest signal of what the canopy has not yet had time to show. To understand a forest, you must look at what is underground, at what is invisible, at what the forest holds most carefully, out of sight. The wood wide web sustains some of the oldest living things on Earth. The bristlecone pines of the American Southwest, alive for 5,000 years, thread their roots through soils whose mycorrhizal communities have been present and continuously active for the entire span of those trees' lives. The network those roots have participated in has witnessed the rise and fall of every human civilization that has existed during those 5,000 years. Every empire, every language, every monument raised and fallen, from a position of perfect stillness, in the dark, beneath the roots of trees that were already old when the first written word was pressed into clay. And it continues, quietly, without record, without interruption, without any awareness, as far as we know, of what passes in the bright world above. The chemical signals that trees release into the mycorrhizal network during stress bear a structural resemblance to signaling compounds found in animal nervous systems. Not an identity, not a direct equivalence, but a parallel, a similarity in molecular structure that has emerged independently in two entirely different kingdoms of life. Whether this parallel reflects a deep evolutionary convergence, two different systems arriving at similar solutions to the problem of internal communication, or whether it is a more superficial chemical coincidence, is something biology has not yet settled. It is one of those places where the investigation of a seemingly simple question opens into something wider, something that asks not merely how trees communicate, but what communication itself is at its most fundamental level. A tree's roots and a forest's network together span an extraordinary range of scales simultaneously. At one end, the molecular exchange at the root-fungal interface, conducted across a gap of nanometers in the biochemical language of proteins and ions. At the other end, the watershed-scale influence of the network on water chemistry and carbon storage and landscape hydrology, effects measurable across kilometers. The same biological system operates meaningfully at both extremes at once, and at every scale between them. There is no other biological structure on Earth quite like it. No other system in which the consequences of a molecular event in the root cell of a single tree can be traced, through a continuous chain of biological cause and effect, to the chemistry of a river running through a valley many miles away. When a forest is young, its network is simple. Few fungal species, thin connections, sparse exchange between trees that are still establishing their root systems in unfamiliar soil. But as the forest ages, as trees grow larger and their roots extend deeper, and the soil accumulates decades of organic matter and fungal diversity, the network becomes something different. Not merely more of the same, but qualitatively richer, more redundant, more capable of rerouting around damage, more able to support the extremes of its community, the very young and the very stressed and the very shaded. Age, in a forest, is not merely the accumulation of years. It is the accumulation of connection, of relationship, of a complexity that cannot be rushed and cannot be replicated by any process faster than the forest's own slow becoming. Every forest that has ever been studied contains species of tree and fungus whose full relationship with each other has never been documented. New partnerships are still being discovered, new chemical signals still being identified, new functions of the network still being confirmed for the first time. The Wood Wide Web is not a solved system. It is an ongoing investigation, one that has been underway in earnest for only a few decades, in a system that has been operating for hundreds of millions of years. The ratio of what is known to what remains unknown is, by any honest accounting, still very much weighted toward the unknown. The forest holds more questions than science has yet learned to ask. The volatile organic compounds released by trees above ground, the ones that give forests their particular smell, the deep green scent of conifers, the warm sweetness of deciduous woodland in summer, are not merely aromatic byproducts of tree chemistry. Some of them function as signals, detected by neighboring trees and triggering responses in their leaf chemistry. Some function as antifungal or antibacterial agents, protecting the tree's outer surfaces. Some may play a role in the formation of clouds above forests, seeding water droplets in ways that influence the rainfall the forest receives. A tree is broadcasting continuously, in chemical language, into the air around it. The forest, above ground and below, is always in the middle of a conversation it never stops having with itself. No complete map of any mycorrhizal network has ever been made. Every attempt to trace the full extent of a network beneath even a small patch of forest has revealed more complexity than the attempt could contain. The threads branch and merge and reconnect in patterns that resist the kind of linear representation that maps require. The network is not a diagram. It is a living geometry, four-dimensional in a sense, extending through space and changing through time simultaneously, so that any map made of it is already a record of what it was rather than what it is. To map it fully would require instruments that do not exist, applied continuously across time, that no study can sustain. The full shape of the Wood Wide Web is, and may always remain, one of the questions the Earth keeps for itself. The trees alive in undisturbed forests today may be nodes in networks that have been continuously active since before the oldest human civilization left its first mark on the world. The soil beneath them has never been turned. The threads within it have never been severed by a blade. The exchange between root and fungus in that soil has continued, season by season, through every event of human history, through every war and invention and extinction and discovery, in complete indifference to all of it, simply doing what it has always done, holding the forest together in the dark. There is something in that continuity, in that absolute faithfulness to function across such an unimaginable span of time, that asks nothing of you but stillness. Just the quiet recognition that something ancient is still here. Even now, as you hold the stillness of this moment, somewhere a tree is giving what it has. Somewhere a fungal thread is crossing the dark between two roots, carrying something the forest needs from where it is held to where it is needed. The transaction is quiet. It has no sound. It leaves no mark on the surface of the ground above it. It has been happening since before there were ears to not hear it, since before there were eyes to not see it, since before there was anyone to know that something so extraordinary was so quietly and continuously occurring beneath the ordinary surface of the world. The forest is not waiting for us to understand it. It is simply continuing, as it always has, as it always will. When a tree dies in an old forest, it does not disappear from the network immediately. Its roots remain biologically connected to the living mycelium for years after its last leaf has fallen. Resources continue to move through those dead root channels. The fungal threads continue to use them as pathways. Neighboring trees continue to receive what passes through the space the dead tree occupied. The forest does not have a word for absence. It has only a word for continuity, for the ongoing circulation of what was held by one, now held by many, for the way the community absorbs an ending and continues without interruption, the way a river absorbs a stone dropped into it and continues, widened perhaps, altered in its small currents, but moving, always moving, toward what it has always moved toward. You have been sitting still while the forest has been moving. Beneath every tree on earth, something is passing between living things right now, in this moment, in the dark below the soil, in a language with no alphabet and no silence between its words. The threads are there, the exchange is there. The ancient agreement between root and fungus is being renewed, molecule by molecule, in soils that have held this conversation since before your species existed, to wonder at it. You do not need to understand it fully for it to hold you. The forest does not require your comprehension. It requires only what it has always required: time and darkness, and the quiet willingness of living things to remain in relationship with each other. Rest now, quietly, exactly where you are. Somewhere, in a forest you may never visit, a thread thinner than your hair is crossing the dark between two roots. It carries something the forest needs. It makes no sound. It asks nothing in return. The trees above it are still. Their leaves, if it is night where that forest stands, are folded slightly inward, their breathing slowed, their chemistry turning toward the long patience of darkness. And below them, the network continues. It does not sleep the way you sleep. It does not rest the way you rest. It simply continues, as it has continued through every night that has ever fallen on this planet, through ice and fire and the long, slow turning of the world. Your body is breathing right now without your asking it to. Your cells are exchanging materials across membranes as thin as the walls of a fungal thread. Something in you is doing, at this moment, what the forest has always done, moving what is needed toward where it is needed, holding things together in the dark. You are not separate from what the forest is doing. You are made of the same patient chemistry. You have roots, in the oldest sense of that word. Let your breath slow now. Let your thoughts thin like mist across still water. The forest does not need you to carry it tonight. It has been carrying itself, and everything that lives within it, for longer than memory reaches. Somewhere, a mother tree is breathing in the dark. Somewhere, a seedling is receiving something it could not have asked for. Through a thread it will never see. From a source it will never know. And the exchange continues. Quietly, slowly, as it always has, as it always will. I hope you sleep well and dream softly. Good night.